Okay, so you want to own a barbershop. Low tech, low overhead, recession-resistant. A business people have needed since long before the internet and will keep needing long after. Rent out chairs, build a loyal clientele, and collect steady income from a service that never gets automated away. It's one of the most approachable small businesses in America, with over 155,000 barbershops already operating nationwide. That is the dream. And it is not entirely wrong. Here's what it doesn't tell you. The exact staffing model that makes barbershops so cheap and simple to run, renting chairs to independent barbers instead of hiring employees, has become one of the most actively litigated labor arrangements in the entire personal services industry, and a growing number of shop owners are finding that out only after a lawsuit lands. Let's start with what it costs to open one. A small 2 to 3 chair shop can launch for $25,000 to $50,000. A mid-sized 4 to 6 chair operation runs $50,000 to $100,000, and a premium urban location with full amenities can exceed $200,000. The lowest barrier entry point of all is simply renting a single chair inside an existing shop, which costs as little as $5,000 to $15,000 to get started, or ongoing monthly booth rent averaging $400 to $600. Nationally, climbing to $1,000 or more in premium markets like New York or Los Angeles. If you're building your own full shop, equipment alone represents 15 to 25% of startup costs, with commercial barber chairs running $500 for a basic hydraulic model, up to $5,000 for a premium Koken or Takara Belmont chair, and a licensed barber requires 1,000 hours of training plus a state exam before ever touching a client's hair, on top of a separate shop or establishment license from the state board or health department. Before you cut a single head of hair, ongoing overhead adds up faster than the low entry price suggests. Rent nationally averages around $35 per square foot annually, meaning a modest 1,500 square foot shop runs about $4,000 a month before utilities, which add another $300 to $800. Payroll for a typical shop running 3 to 5 barbers lands at $6,000 to $12,000 a month, depending on your compensation structure. And employee benefits and payroll taxes add another 20 to 30% on top of base wages if you're running a traditional employment model rather than booth rental. Here's the trap sitting underneath the entire industry. And it's the reason booth rental became the dominant staffing model in the first place. Under a booth rental arrangement, a barber pays the shop owner a fixed weekly or monthly fee for the use of a chair, keeps 100% of what clients pay them directly, and the shop owner avoids payroll taxes, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and overtime obligations entirely, treating each barber as an independent business owner rather than an employee. It's an appealing structure precisely because it shifts most of the financial risk onto the barber and simplifies the owner's books. But labor regulators and courts have increasingly scrutinized this arrangement, the same way they've scrutinized similar rental-based staffing models across other personal service industries. And the legal test hinges on actual control, not just what the contract says. If the shop dictates schedules, sets prices, requires specific products, or manages client relationships in ways that look more like employment than independent contracting, courts have repeatedly found that calling someone a booth renter doesn't make it true. Once a shop is properly structured, the revenue model runs through a few layers common across the industry. The core is service revenue itself: haircuts, beard trims, and grooming packages, priced by service and typically running $30 to $60 per haircut in most American markets, with premium urban shops charging considerably more. Layered on top is retail, pomades, clippers, grooming products sold at the front counter, which carries meaningfully higher margins than the labor-intensive service itself. Booth rental income for shop owners who lease chairs rather than employ barbers directly provides fixed, predictable revenue completely detached from how busy any individual barber's book actually is, similar in structure to how a mall collects rent regardless of a tenant's daily foot traffic. Average barbershop profit margins run 10 to 20%, with well-managed shops pushing toward the higher end through strong retail attachment and premium service tiers. Now, the disaster case study, and it's a direct hit on the exact staffing model this industry has leaned on for decades. Lady Jane's Haircuts for Men, a national men's grooming chain, was hit with a federal class action lawsuit in Michigan in 2023, with stylists alleging the company misclassified them as independent contractors rather than employees, thereby denying them legally mandated minimum wage and overtime pay for all their hours worked. The plaintiffs argued that despite being labeled independent contractors on paper, the actual working conditions, scheduling, supervision, and control the company exercised over their day-to-day work met the legal definition of employment under federal and state wage law, not the independent, self-directed arrangement the booth rental label implied. This wasn't an isolated incident. Around the same period, a nail salon in Temecula, California, was hit with a $1.2 million fine after regulators found 36 workers misclassified, and a 25-location nail salon chain in New York City was ordered to pay $300,000 to more than 100 current and former employees over the exact same underlying issue. None of these businesses were failing operationally. Clients kept coming in, chairs stayed full, and the day-to-day service never stopped. The problem, in every case, was that the paperwork calling someone an independent contractor didn't match how the business actually treated them day to day. And the gap between the label and the reality is precisely where wage and hour attorneys have increasingly focused industry-wide as this exact business model comes under sustained legal scrutiny for the first time in decades. Let's run the numbers on two scenarios. Optimistic case. You open a 5-chair shop for $80,000, running a properly documented booth rental model where each barber genuinely sets their own hours, pricing, and client relationships, with a rental agreement carefully structured to meet the legal tests for independent contractor status. You collect $500 a month per chair in rent, generating $30,000 a year in pure rental income, plus retail sales, pushing total revenue to $45,000 a year against operating costs of $20,000, leaving a genuine $25,000 annual margin with minimal payroll tax exposure and minimal legal risk, since the underlying relationship actually matches the contract. Realistic case. The same 5-chair shop using a similar booth rental agreement on paper, but day-to-day operations that look more like traditional employment, mandatory schedules, dictated pricing, required products, and close supervision of each barber's client interactions, exactly the pattern plaintiffs alleged against Lady Jane's. Revenue looks identical to the optimistic scenario for years. Then a single disgruntled former barber files a wage claim, or a Labor Department audit flags the arrangement, and the shop faces retroactive liability for unpaid minimum wage, overtime, and payroll taxes across every barber who ever worked under the same misclassified structure, a bill that can easily exceed years of the shop's entire accumulated profit in one settlement or judgment. So if you decide to own a barbershop, understand what you're actually buying. You're not just buying a low-overhead personal service business, though it genuinely can be that. You're buying into a staffing model, chair and booth rental, that has become one of the most actively contested labor classifications in the country, where the difference between a profitable, low-liability shop and a business facing years of back wages comes down to whether your day-to-day operations actually match the independent contractor label on your rental agreements. Structure it honestly, and this remains one of the most durable, straightforward small businesses in America. Treat the contractor label as a formality rather than a genuine operating reality. And you may find out, the way Lady Jane's did, that a full appointment book doesn't protect you from a lawsuit built entirely on how much control you actually had over the people cutting hair under your roof.